In the vast, unforgiving expanse of the galaxy, there were threats that could erase entire civilizations without a trace. Among them was a virus, whispered about in the dark corners of alien assemblies, feared as the deadliest pathogen ever known. It reduced the mighty to ash and left entire worlds lifeless. But when this terrifying plague reached humanity, something bizarre happened humans barely noticed. What was considered the apex of galactic devastation, they brushed off as a mild flu. Yet beneath their complacency lurked a truth far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. The distant star system of Kepler-9 had always been considered an unremarkable dot on the galactic map. For centuries, it remained a faint point of light in the endless void, dismissed as insignificant by astronomers and explorers alike. Its planets were barren, devoid of life, and shrouded in atmospheres too hostile to support even the simplest forms of existence. Kepler-9c, one of its many lifeless worlds, was no exception, a desolate rock locked in an eternal dance with its dim, fading star. Yet it was this very planet that triggered the first ripple in the sequence of events that would forever alter the fate of humanity. The warning came in the form of a long-dormant distress signal. Faint and fragmented, it emerged from the static of deep space transmissions. The signal originated from an automated research station left to decay in orbit around Kepler-9c. Decades ago, this station had been established by an ambitious coalition of alien species, its mission to study anomalous readings detected on the planet's surface. Its purpose, however, had been abandoned after the researchers encountered something they deemed too dangerous to study further. Classified as Project Quarantine, all data from the station had been encrypted, its systems powered down indefinitely until now. When the signal reactivated, it carried a stark warning: containment breach, biological hazard detected, do not approach. The garbled message repeated on a loop, accompanied by corrupted fragments of data logs that hinted at the station's grim fate. Most of the scientific community dismissed it as an error. After all, the galaxy was littered with abandoned outposts and malfunctioning AI systems, broadcasting outdated distress signals. To them, Kepler-9c was little more than a ghost planet, its secrets buried beneath centuries of neglect. But curiosity is a powerful force, and humanity had never been one to leave questions unanswered. A small team of exploratory scientists was dispatched to investigate. The crew, outfitted with advanced biohazard suits and state-of-the-art containment measures, saw the mission as routine, a chance to collect data and prove the warning to be yet another false alarm. Their shuttle entered orbit around Kepler-9c, descending toward the research station that had floated, untouched, for decades. Inside, the station was eerily quiet. The air was stale, the walls coated in a thin layer of frost from the cold vacuum of space. Equipment lay scattered as though its operators had left in a hurry, abandoning their posts in what appeared to be sheer panic. The explorers found no bodies, no signs of struggle, only an overwhelming sense of absence, as if the station had been emptied in an instant. Yet the deeper they probed, the clearer the truth became. Their instruments picked up traces of something foreign lingering in the station's ventilation systems. Microscopic particles of an unknown substance clung to every surface. Scans identified it as biological in nature, its structure unlike anything cataloged in human or alien databases. The explorers collected samples and returned to their shuttle, unaware that what they had found would soon rewrite the narrative of survival across the galaxy. The explorers returned to Earth with their findings, confident they had uncovered little more than a curious footnote in the galaxy's long history of strange phenomena. The samples they collected were sealed in biocontainment canisters, shipped off to research facilities where experts could analyze their nature. On the surface, the anomaly seemed harmless, just another peculiar microbial strain, its structure unique but unthreatening. Scientists marveled at its composition, noting that it appeared inert, its metabolic processes frozen as though in suspended animation. Initial tests suggested it posed no immediate danger to human physiology. As days turned to weeks, interest in the samples waned. Researchers categorized the substance as a potential artifact of Kepler-9c's ancient ecosystem, theorizing it might be the remnants of a once thriving biosphere. Some argued it was merely debris left behind by alien experiments conducted long before humanity had taken its first steps into space. Whatever its origins, it was quickly deemed a low-priority subject for study. The samples were placed in storage, locked away in temperature-controlled vaults alongside countless other curiosities awaiting further analysis. But there were anomalies that couldn't be ignored. In the days following the initial study, several researchers began reporting mild, unexplained symptoms, headaches, fatigue, and a general sense of unease. These were dismissed as the inevitable side effects of long hours in the lab. After all, they were working under constant pressure, juggling multiple projects, and dealing with the isolation that came with deep space research. No one connected these symptoms to the samples from Kepler 9c. The first true warning came when a containment breach occurred in one of the laboratories. It was a minor incident. A technician accidentally damaged a containment canister during routine maintenance. The breach was quickly contained, the area sterilized, and the technician placed under medical observation as a precaution. He showed no immediate signs of illness, and the event was logged as an isolated mishap. The lab resumed operations within hours, the incident soon forgotten. Yet, over the following weeks, subtle changes began to emerge among the research team. They were too small to draw immediate attention. Slight lapses in memory, occasional irritability, and a growing sense of detachment among those working closest to the samples. More troubling, however, was the data emerging from deeper analyses of the substance. What had initially appeared to be inert began exhibiting signs of activity. Under specific environmental conditions, the microscopic particles showed bursts of rapid, unpredictable motion, as though responding to external stimuli. It wasn't until one researcher collapsed during a routine observation that alarms were raised. Medical scans revealed abnormalities in her cellular structure patterns that suggested a rapid, invasive replication of foreign material within her body. The substance from Kepler 9c was no longer inert. It was alive and it was spreading. Despite these findings, many dismissed the threat as contained, assuming Earth's advanced medical technology could easily manage the anomaly. The virus was categorized as a curiosity rather than a danger, but in the dark corners of the facility where the samples lay, the pathogen was adapting, preparing for the next phase of its invasion. Months passed, and the incident at the research facility faded into the background of human priorities. Life moved on, with the scientific community shifting focus to more immediate concerns: terraforming new worlds, engineering breakthroughs, and galactic diplomacy. Meanwhile, the samples from Kepler 9c remained sealed in vaults, their existence a forgotten whisper in humanity's ever-expanding narrative. In the outer colonies, far removed from the comforts of Earth, whispers of illness began to emerge. It started quietly, almost innocuously. Miners on remote asteroid belts and settlers on newly terraformed worlds reported persistent headaches and bouts of unexplained fatigue. Local medics dismissed these symptoms as the byproducts of harsh living conditions, overwork, or the inevitable toll of long-term exposure to unstable atmospheres. But then the symptoms grew stranger. Those afflicted began reporting vivid, intrusive dreams, fragments of impossible places and strange alien landscapes. Their descriptions were eerily consistent even among individuals separated by vast distances. Many awoke disoriented, their minds clouded by images they couldn't explain. Some became increasingly withdrawn, their personalities shifting as though pieces of their humanity were quietly slipping away. When the first death occurred, it was written off as a tragic accident. A young miner collapsed in the tunnels of a newly opened dig site, his body found hours later by his colleagues. Initial scans revealed an unexplained failure of his immune system, his cells showing signs of degradation that didn't match any known disease. It was considered an anomaly, an isolated case with no apparent connection to the spreading illnesses. But anomalies don't remain isolated for long. Within weeks, entire mining outposts were reporting similar cases. Workers who had appeared healthy days earlier were suddenly bedridden, their bodies racked with fever and unrelenting pain. Medical teams scrambled to contain what they assumed was a localized outbreak of an unknown pathogen. Quarantines were enacted and treatment protocols were deployed. Yet nothing worked. The afflicted showed no response to antibiotics, antivirals, or any other intervention. Instead, they continued to deteriorate, their bodies succumbing to a force no one could understand. What made matters worse was the pathogen's ability to evade detection. Standard tests revealed nothing unusual, leaving medical professionals baffled. It wasn't until advanced molecular scans were performed that the truth began to emerge. Within the cells of the infected, traces of a foreign agent were found as substance with a structure eerily similar to the samples recovered from Kepler 9c. Panic began to set in. The colonies most affected by the illness were placed under strict lockdown, their inhabitants isolated from the rest of humanity. Yet the virus continued to spread. It moved silently, invisibly, infecting new hosts with a speed and precision that defied containment efforts. Entire communities began falling into disarray, their populations crippled by the disease. Still, on Earth, the reports were met with skepticism. The outbreaks were happening on the fringes of human civilization, in places long considered expendable. The virus was deemed a minor issue, an inconvenience confined to the outer edges of space. Humanity continued to underestimate the threat, oblivious to the storm that was quietly brewing. On Earth, life carried on with its usual rhythm, the outer colonies' struggles viewed as distant and unrelated to the bustling heart of humanity's civilization. News of the outbreaks trickled in, but they were buried beneath headlines celebrating technological breakthroughs and the colonization of new star systems. Most dismissed the reports as exaggerated accounts of illnesses caused by poor conditions and inadequate medical facilities on the frontier. But for those closely monitoring the situation, the data painted a far more alarming picture. The virus was no longer contained to the colonies. Cases began appearing on trade routes connecting Earth to the outer systems, carried by unsuspecting travelers who showed no signs of illness until it was too late. Spacers and transport crews reported strange sensations, brief, almost imperceptible lapses in memory, flashes of déjà vu, and a nagging feeling of disconnection from reality. The changes were subtle at first. People began forgetting small details, misplacing objects they swore they had just held. Their sleep was disturbed by dreams that felt too vivid to be anything but real. Dreams of alien landscapes and incomprehensible geometries haunted them, their fragmented images seeping into waking thoughts. Yet those affected often shrugged off these signs, dismissing them as stress or fatigue. In densely populated areas, the virus found fertile ground to spread. Initially, it targeted the marginalized, the overworked, the underpaid, those whose lives were already overlooked. They were the first to exhibit more advanced symptoms, their behavior growing increasingly erratic. Some became unresponsive, staring blankly at walls for hours as though their minds were elsewhere. Others experienced sudden bursts of paranoia, convinced they were being watched or followed by unseen entities. Hospitals filled with patients exhibiting a baffling array of symptoms. Despite exhaustive testing, doctors found no common denominator other than a slight anomaly in their brain activity, subtle, irregular pulses of electrical signals in regions associated with memory and perception. It was as if the virus wasn't just attacking the body but altering the very essence of its host. Reports from the outer colonies described the changes in chilling detail. The infected didn't simply fall ill, they began to change. Their physical appearance remained mostly intact, but their mannerisms grew strange, their movements too fluid and deliberate. What frightened observers most was their silence. Those who had once been vibrant, vocal members of their communities spoke less and less, their expressions devoid of emotion. Then came the disappearances. Entire families vanished overnight, leaving behind homes that looked untouched, as if the occupants had simply walked out and never returned. Search parties found no trace of them, only faint tracks leading into wilderness or abandoned structures. It became clear that the virus wasn't merely killing, it was taking. The truth began to dawn on those who had ignored the early warnings. This was no mild illness, no mere nuisance that could be ignored or outlasted. The virus had no interest in humanity's strength or resilience. It was patient, spreading quietly, altering its hosts with every new infection. It wasn't just evolving, it was waiting. And whatever it was waiting for, humanity was running out of time to stop it. As the virus quietly spread, humanity's response remained fragmented and insufficient. Governments and organizations argued over the severity of the threat, unwilling to acknowledge the growing evidence. Earth's population still viewed the outbreaks as a distant problem, affecting only the colonies and a handful of unlucky travelers. The illusion of safety persisted, bolstered by humanity's arrogance in believing their medical technology could overcome any disease. Meanwhile, the virus continued its invisible march. It was a pathogen unlike any other silent invader that bypassed traditional means of detection. By the time its presence was suspected, it had already infiltrated vast swaths of the population. Its brilliance lay in its subtlety. Most hosts showed no outward signs of infection for weeks, even months. The few who did exhibit symptoms were dismissed as outliers, their conditions misdiagnosed or blamed on unrelated factors. In research labs, scientists worked tirelessly to understand the virus. Under microscopes, it appeared unremarkable, a seemingly simple structure of protein and genetic material. But the more they studied it, the more anomalies they uncovered. The virus wasn't just replicating, it was rewriting. It integrated itself into the very DNA of its host, leaving behind traces of its presence even after the infection seemed to subside. These alterations were small at first, insignificant enough to evade detection. But over time, they compounded, reshaping the body and mind in ways no one could predict. One chilling discovery came from studying recovered samples of infected tissues. Under the right conditions, the altered cells began to behave in ways that defied biological norms. They displayed a level of coordination, a kind of collective intelligence that suggested the virus wasn't just a pathogen, it was a network. Each host it infected became a part of something larger, their minds and bodies connected by invisible threads of influence. Then came the transmissions. Across the galaxy, reports surfaced of strange signals detected in areas heavily affected by the virus. These signals were faint, almost imperceptible, but they carried patterns that defied explanation. Some speculated they were the result of interference from the virus's effects on neural activity. Others suggested a far more unsettling possibility: the virus was communicating. Colonial authorities, overwhelmed by the rapid spread and lacking adequate resources, began abandoning entire settlements. Quarantine measures failed as infected individuals slipped through the cracks, carrying the virus to new worlds and populations. Desperation turned to chaos as once thriving colonies descended into anarchy. The infected, now referred to as the altered, no longer resembled their former selves. Their actions were deliberate but incomprehensible, driven by a purpose no one could decipher. On Earth, cracks in the illusion of safety began to form. High-ranking officials and prominent figures started exhibiting signs of infection. Whispers of unexplained disappearances and erratic behavior reached the public, fueling paranoia and fear. Yet, even as the truth became undeniable, humanity remained divided, some clinging to the belief that the threat could be contained, others resigned to the grim reality that it was already too late. And through it all, the virus remained silent, its motives hidden, its purpose unknown. But its influence was unmistakable, growing stronger with every passing day. It wasn't just a disease, it was a harbinger of something far greater, something humanity was only beginning to understand. The turning point came when the virus revealed its true nature. It started subtly, as everything about it had, with changes that seemed harmless at first glance. Across multiple colonies and even on Earth, the infected began exhibiting synchronized behavior. They moved with uncanny precision, their actions coordinated as if guided by a singular, unseen force. Those who observed them couldn't deny the growing sense of unease. These weren't mindless victims of a disease, they were something else entirely. In the lab, scientists made a horrifying breakthrough. Through advanced neural scans, they discovered that the virus was not merely altering its hosts physically, but was fundamentally reshaping their brains. The regions associated with individuality, critical thinking, and emotional response were suppressed. In their place, neural activity surged in areas connected to pattern recognition and collective action. The infected weren't just losing themselves, they were being reprogrammed. Worse still, the signals detected in heavily infected regions were increasing in frequency and complexity. Analysis revealed they were far too structured to be random. The patterns bore the hallmarks of communication: deliberate, purposeful transmissions. When the signals were mapped, they formed a network spanning vast distances, linking the infected across entire star systems. The virus wasn't simply spreading, it was organizing. The implications were staggering. What had once been dismissed as a biological anomaly was now understood to be a weapon, one designed to convert entire populations into extensions of itself. The infected were no longer individuals, but nodes in a vast, growing network. And the virus wasn't working alone. The signals it emitted were directed, their patterns hinting at an intelligence behind the disease. As this revelation spread, panic gripped the galaxy. Governments scrambled to contain the threat, implementing draconian measures to isolate infected populations. Entire starports were shut down, interstellar travel was severely restricted, and trade routes were abandoned. Military forces were deployed to quarantine zones, tasked with enforcing brutal containment protocols. But it was all too late. The virus had already infiltrated every level of society, from the slums of outer colonies to the gleaming halls of power on Earth. No one was immune. The infected moved among the uninfected, their symptoms masked until the moment they were activated. When that moment came, the results were catastrophic. In one of the outer colonies, a mining facility went dark without warning. When rescue teams arrived, they found the entire workforce gone. Tools were left where they'd been dropped, meals half-eaten, and machinery still running. There were no signs of struggle, only faint footprints leading into the wilderness. Similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy, ships found drifting in space, their crews missing, cities abandoned overnight with no explanation. It became clear that the virus wasn't simply killing or altering its hosts, it was taking them somewhere. The infected were gathering, drawn by the signals to unknown destinations. Attempts to track them proved futile, as they disappeared into uncharted territories, beyond the reach of sensors or scouts. Humanity was no longer facing a disease. They were confronting an invasion, one that had been silently building in their midst, its true purpose still shrouded in mystery. And as the infected vanished into the void, the signals grew stronger, heralding the approach of something far greater and far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. Desperate to prevent further assimilation, humanity launched a massive offensive. Fleets of warships, armed with the most advanced weapons ever developed, converged on the construct. The plan was simple: obliterate the structure and sever the network before it could spread any further. But simplicity doesn't guarantee success. As the fleet drew closer, they encountered a chilling reality. The structure wasn't just a vessel, it was alive, pulsing with an alien consciousness that seemed to anticipate their every move. The infected weren't passive hosts anymore, they had become part of something far greater, something that no longer resembled humanity's idea of life. Their bodies, now indistinguishable from the structure, moved with a purpose beyond comprehension. They weren't resisting, they were part of the network, working in unison toward an unknown goal. The warships opened fire, unleashing their fury in a desperate attempt to destroy the construct. But their attacks were futile. The structure absorbed the energy, adapting with impossible speed. Every shot seemed to strengthen it, every explosion fueling its growth. The virus, now a part of this vast entity, wasn't just surviving, it was evolving, adapting to humanity's weapons, becoming something even more formidable. As the battle raged on, reports from the front lines came in, each more disturbing than the last. The infected weren't just transforming, they were communicating. The signals that had once been faint now blazed with intensity, growing louder and more complex. And as the fleets pressed forward, the unthinkable happened. The transmissions began to merge. The voices of the infected, once scattered across the galaxy, now unified into a singular, haunting chorus. They spoke not with words but with images, visions of places no one could recognize, of realities beyond human understanding. The signals weren't just communication, they were a call, a summons. The fleet's captains grew desperate, unable to decipher the meaning of these transmissions. Some believed the construct was calling its creators, others feared it was summoning something far worse. The infected themselves had become conduits for this unknown force, their bodies and minds now extensions of it. They no longer sought to assimilate, they sought to become part of something far beyond humanity's grasp. As the last hope of humanity faded, a chilling realization set in: the war wasn't about survival, it was about submission. The virus wasn't just a disease, not merely an enemy, it was a gateway, and humanity had walked right into it, lured by its own arrogance, blinded by its need to conquer. The stars no longer promised safety, only the eerie silence of an endless void. And as the final echoes of the network faded into darkness, humanity was left to wonder, was this the end, or the beginning of something far worse? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Sci-Fi Horizons Stories for more thrilling tales of science fiction and adventure. And remember, the galaxy isn't done with humanity, yet prepare for the next encounter, where danger awaits beyond the stars. Stay curious and stay safe.